has a huge impact, a lot of power within our society. So some of those big sort of newspapers, such as the News of the World, as you can see that little headline with the little girl Madeleine McCann, who went missing and was never found, probably the biggest crime news story there's ever been in the history of humanity, on the front pages of every newspaper for well over a year. Countless accusations, stories about what might have happened, and everybody was wrapped into it. And still, we still see the odd story in the front pages today, long after that, a normal news story would have went cold. So the media are completely obsessed by crime because they know that we also are incredibly interested in it, and that sells newspapers. Then with things like shoplifting in a shop, you can see a couple of youngsters drinking a bottle of Buckfast, the Bucky as they like to call it. You have a guy up on top of a police Land Rover, sort of in a sort of riot situation as well, further over to the right, people throwing petrol bombs and things like that. So you can see that there's a lot of, talk about antisocial behavior, about public order, as well as sort of some of those more sort of minor offenses as well that people are interested in from a criminal justice point of view. You have somebody getting a stop and search in the bottom left-hand corner as well. Massive issue for young people growing up, particularly from working class neighborhoods and things like that, where you're far more likely to be stopped and searched by the police than other neighborhoods. In places like England, if you're black, for example, you're far more likely to be stopped and searched as well, which, is something that us as criminologists try to unpack and think about. The famous Monopoly board, probably one of our first experiences of the risk of going to jail. This little phone booth is an interesting one. Before I started as a lecturer in Ulster University, I've been teaching at Ulster now for 3.5 years, but before then I taught in England in a university called Gloucestershire. It was in the sunny town of Cheltenham, which is really famous for having a race course, with the Gold Cup and the Great Cheltenham Festival and everything else. But what some people maybe don't know Cheltenham for quite as much is the fact that it's also where GCHQ is based, which is Global Communications Headquarters of the British government. And this is a Banksy picture, which actually is situated close to the grounds at GCHQ. In a street, and when you have the old-fashioned sort of snoopers listening in to somebody on their phone conversation in the phone box, which I think is really interesting. You have criminal justice process then going through the courts and everything else, all those courtroom dramas and everything else that we're so fascinated about. And then, of course, that livid reality then, if you are prosecuted and found guilty, there's a very good chance that you may end up in incarceration then. So what happens to people who are incarcerated? Do they turn their lives around, or do they get caught up into a spiral of offending and going back in and out of prison constantly? What sort of things happen in prison? We hear a lot about, drug problems in prisons and problems with addiction, problem with mental health. And people would say that if you want to actually, sort people out and make them fully fledged members of society again, sending them to prison sometimes isn't the best, thing to do, particularly for those who have maybe done relatively minor offenses. So we talk about all those things. So from that point of view, why are we interested in crime? Lots of different things going on there. For the newspapers, I think they know that, fear of crime is a big issue there. And they know rightly that when we feel fearful about something, it really grabs our attention. So the fear that we might become a victim is one reason why we're so obsessed, about crime. Certainly, I always remember when I worked over in Gloucestershire, I had to walk back to my flat down this tiny little towpath, which went along an old railway line, and it was so creepy. And I'm a big, hairy Egypt, but even then, when I was walking down, I always sort of felt a bit creepy, like somebody was going to jump out of the bushes and everything else. So, that fear is always there. Similar with the headlines, the more macabre and the more weird, the greater the fascination. Hence why a lot of you weirdos that I'm talking to right now are obsessed about serial killers and want to come to university to investigate all the most heinous killings and things like that in the past, to where we get a lot of that. The fact that crime affects us all is really important as well. It's omnipresent. It's endemic to society. There's huge amounts of money spent in controlling crime as well and trying to prevent it. And then when we do try to prevent crime and when we try to prosecute it, what sorts of people are being prosecuted? What sorts of people are going to prison? Is there an issue there where, prison is hugely overrepresented by people from poor backgrounds, people from maybe ethnic minority backgrounds, and so on and so forth? Why is that happening? When we see people getting arrested and people getting searched, as I say, is that being done fairly? or are the police searching people who they think they would have the most, chance of success, most chance of finding something on? And so they target the sorts of communities where perhaps there are drug problems and things like that, which maybe leads to people from them communities having to go to prison as well. So huge amounts of issues there going on. I see a couple of questions starting to flood in here as well, so please keep firing in those questions, and my helper will be able to give me a bit of a hand with them as I go. But I'm conscious of time as well, so I'm going to plow on for the time being. So, criminology and criminal justice at Ulster University. What is it all about? Criminology is the study of crime, its control, and how crime and criminal behaviour are related to other social issues. And so some of the things that you guys might think about when you arrive to study criminology at Ulster is, what is a crime? Crime is quite a contested thing to begin with, because at the end of the day, politicians decide what is a crime and what is not a crime. If they think something is worthy of a crime, they legislate in Parliament for it. It passes through the House of Lords and arrives on the statute book and becomes a law, and then the police then have to go out and police it. So what might be happening in society round about that time, when that law is passed, has a huge impact on what the politicians decide to do. So some crimes, arrive because, politicians realize that the public are really worried about something, but the public can sometimes be worried about things because of moral panics and big scares and things like that. And sometimes that means we can get laws which are a little bit too harsh or a little bit too situated in a problem at the time, and doesn't really sort of reflect what else has been going on with society. Just trying to get rid of this little thing. There we go. So what is a crime is a big one. Crime is socially constructed in some ways. We tell the politicians what we're worried about and they come up with that. So then we have crimes, and then, it's basically obvious if you break a crime, you break the law, you're likely to go to prison, or you're at least going to get, a criminal sanction of some sort. So why do people still break the law? Some people, I suppose, who have had a really nice, safe background and, haven't got a lot of problems. They don't have any issues with addiction or homelessness or any of these sort of problems. They might find it reasonably easy to steer a nice path between the lines and not break the law. But some people who have a more chaotic life, they maybe had a bit of a disadvantaged background, they maybe have some abuse and things like that in their background. Those sorts of people might find it much, much more difficult not to break the law. But then, unfortunately, when they do break the law, they end up in prison, which can sort of perpetuate and exacerbate some of those, issues that they have. So how our criminal justice system works, how it responds to those sorts of challenges is a big issue for criminology. So why do some people abuse others is another crazy question. We talked about serial killers there, what's going on in their heads? How do the victims of the abuse cope with their experiences? How can we improve the relationship, for example, between young people and police is something which I write about quite a lot in my research. And it's a constant problem, again, where there has been a bit of a moral panic about the behavior of young people. Young people are often seen as being very risky in terms of their behavior. They're seen as being, immoral. They're seen as out of control. We see things in the newspapers about feral youth and all these sort of deeply, stereotypical views about young people, which has led to a policing style with young people, which has quite often been quite adversarial, quite punitive. So how can we improve that relationship? How can we work with the police to ensure that young people aren't getting a raw deal in terms of the policing they get? Talk about global crime problems. That's another one that I write about a bit in terms of my research. So organized crime, how does the global world that we live in, the fact that the world is now dominated by the internet, by the free trade, which transcends borders and causes huge opportunities for crime. You have container ships full of people, crossing oceans and arriving in our ports. And, how can we deal with that sort of issue? Never mind drugs and all these other different types of issues. So a massive range of different types of crimes and issues will come up as you progress through your degree at Ulster University. And we'll get to, give a little bit more detail on that with this slide. So the thing with Ulster is that each member of staff is research active, which means that they do cutting edge, internationally leading research into a topic that they feel most inspired about, and they then write up their research for publication in academic journals, in books, in blogs, in all sorts of different types of publications. And so across the criminology team, the different lectures that we have, you will find that they are active researchers in these areas. So the things that I research are restorative justice, global crime, organized crime, and things like that, and also community policing. Other people would be quite active in sort of doing lots of research in prisons, also looking at corporate and state crime, corruption in governments and things like that is something which comes across. We have an internationally leading researcher who looks at cybercrime and has some very spooky lectures, which the students, they'll tape up their webcams on their laptops after they've left the lecture theatre because they've been so terrified by some of the things that they've learned. We have people who, who study media and crime. We have people who study terrorism in great depth. The role of victims in crime too, making sure that their voices aren't ignored when we try to think of ways that we can change crime and crime control. Can we get the victim more involved in the criminal process is something which I really, focus a lot on in my lectures as well in particular. We investigate drug use, the causes of drugs and addiction to drugs, and then look at some of those drug control measures. We hear a lot about the war against drugs, for example. Has the war against drugs been successful in America? It doesn't look like it. So we look at the problems and the pitfalls of trying to, have a militarized response to the drugs problem, rather than trying to deal with it as a public health issue and giving people the help that they require. And then things such as globalization, the geography crime, I talked a little bit about as well. And certainly in my global crime module, which you'll get in final year, we talk a lot about globalization and how it facilitates crime, how we have these huge international criminal gangs that transcend borders. So you could have a Yakuza gang from Japan who have links to every country around the world and use that to facilitate drug trafficking and human trafficking and other sorts of crimes. So globalization has thrown global crime and organized crime really wide open. So that example of Tony Soprano that I talked about with The Sopranos, this amazing TV show that was on HBO, many of you guys will never have watched The Sopranos. You need to go and check it out. But in some ways, The Sopranos was quite a local organized crime syndicate. It was set in New Jersey, in the state of New York, and it was basically about power and control in that one little region. That has changed a lot now in relation to organized crime. It's become much, much more of a global picture. So if you were going to watch a TV show which best summed up global crime, The Wire, for example, is a fantastic example of how to police global crime. It's set in Baltimore in USA, but it talks about how Baltimore is linked to the whole world. And so it's a big, massive container ship port, for example, and one entire series is based on looking at human trafficking and all these other types of crime, munitions trafficking and things like that. So really interesting stuff around that. So everybody's module really is quite inspiring, I think. And when you learn one of these topics, it's inspiring. It's really captures your imagination and captures your attention because your lecturer is so into this stuff and is researching it on a day-to-day basis. Okay, next slide then. So I was just sort of talking a little bit about research interest there, and it's nice maybe to put a few faces to the names. This is the current teaching team here at Ulster University. We have Olivier Barnes, who teaches a lot of state crime and corruption. We have Linda Moore, who is our prisons guru and teaches lots of other interesting stuff too, including research methods. Ruth McAllister is our cybercrime guru, and she's the one that terrifies the students with some of the crazy things that happen on the internet, and how when you think that you're having a nice safe time on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that, you could be very much at risk from some of these organized crime syndicates and people like that. Una Convery is our year tutor for first year and be the first port of call for you guys when you arrive, and is also an expert in victimology and victims. Professor Christian Laslett is the head of school and also teaches a little bit, and he is very much interested in corruption at a state level and international corruption across governments. People like Vladimir Putin and the tentacles that they are able to wind around countries like Africa and places like continents like Africa, sorry, I should say. There's me looking very happy, and I'm interested in policing, restorative justice and global crime. Conor Murray is our prisons guy as well. He did his PhD on Hyde Bank, young offenders prison, and is really interested in things such as masculinity in young men, both in the communities around Belfast and also then within prison. Michael Davison is our policing guru as well, who does a lot of different policing studies and trains police officers. And Julie Harris is our drugs guru and knows all things about drugs and drug addiction and crime control about drugs and researches very heavily as well. So there you go. It's a bit of a background story. How am I doing for time? I think I have about maybe about 6 minutes before we have to hit the Q&A. So I'll keep going. So, what will you guys expect when you arrive at Ulster University to study criminology and criminal justice? Well, there are 18 modules which you take over 3 years. So it sounds like a lot, but it's not too bad. It's 6 modules per year. So there's 2 semesters. You have the autumn semester and then you have the spring semester. And so you'll do 3 modules in autumn and then 3 modules in spring. And then you'll repeat that for 3 years. And at the end of it, you will have your fantastic, successful degree in criminology, or one of the associated criminology degrees. Each of the modules lasts 12 weeks, which doesn't sound very long, but trust me, when you're teaching them, by the time you get to week 12, you're hanging on by your fingernails. But basically that is, starting off with an introductory lecture, and then every week you go in depth into one particular aspect of the topic, which that module covers. So most of the lectures are either 2 hours and have a 1 hour seminar, or they're 3 hours long as well. So you get quite a lot of contact time from that point of view. So you do 9 hours contact a week, really, in terms of your teaching, not including studies, supervision, self-study, and your own research. You have to do a lot of your own research. You're expected to be in the library researching your next assignment, doing background reading for each lecture and so on. So even though you only see people like me standing in front of you, for 9 hours during the week, and that might not sound like a huge amount of time, but all those spaces in between your lectures and things like that, you're very busy doing a lot of different types of background research and reading up stuff and starting to write your assignments. By the time you're getting close to the end of the 12 weeks, when you've got 3 assignment due dates coming up and things like that, that you're very busy indeed. So you need a lot of self-study. You need a lot of sort of motivation, I suppose, and academic discipline, we call it sometimes, where you have to use your own initiative. It's the end of maybe having a teacher standing over you with a big stick, making you do these things, particularly if you've moved out of your house as well and gone into halls or something like that. You need to be sort of pretty focused on the fact that this degree is quite a big deal, and you need to put the work in order to be a success at it. So we start with a broad base of criminology and law modules in year 1. We give you just set modules in year 1. You don't get any choices. We just tell you what you're doing and you turn up, and that's that. But then as soon as you get into second year, we start to give you lots of options where you can start to tailor your own degree to the sort of specialisms that you're really interested in, what you think you might do well in. You can even start to look at the assessments for those modules and think, well, I don't really like exams, so I'm going to do this one because it's 2 assignments, and so on and so forth. So there you see, in year 1, when you arrive, you have 3 set modules in each semester. So you start off with law for criminologists with Ivan Topping. You have studying criminology with Una, and you have introduction to crime and deviance with me and Riff McAllister. In semester, so that introduction to crime and deviance is your big sort of introduction to the whole field of criminology. We go across the whole thing basically, and give you a sort of really good, crash course in criminology and what it's about. Ivan gives you a really good crash course in the legal underpinnings for criminology as well. And studying criminology starts to give you those study skills that you need, those research sort of skills that you're going to need, which you're going to be applying your research skills in your assignments the whole way through your degree. In semester 2, you do crime and criminal justice, which looks at that criminal process in the courts in much, much more detail. Crime scene to court is about forensics, so it's a lot of it is about police investigations and that sort of thing. So you'll be talking about blood splatter and taking plaster casts of people's footprints and all that sort of stuff. We'll be studying DNA, studying how mobile phone technology and other types of communication are being used, geographical location type stuff, the police call it, and how a lot of the times when people now get caught in police investigations, it's because, their technology gave them away. And then we talk about theories, because you're studying to be a criminologist. You need to understand all the sort of founding fathers and founding mothers who have come up with these massive criminological theories, some of them 60, 70 years ago, which still apply today as well. So giving you that really good underpinning for that. I can see our Q&A still going well. See we have a little question here on careers. I have a slide just at the end in a little second, which I'll get to in a wee while, which will be able to set out what our career sort of options are. Just quickly, year 2, you see all of a sudden that you have 2 compulsory modules, and then you get to choose between 3 or 4 optional modules, and they sort of change every year. They might change a bit before you get here next year, just based on which lecturers are available and who's teaching what and everything else. So you will be doing work volunteering in criminal justice, which will get you maybe a little placement and start to get you some experience, either in a voluntary position or doing some sort of short internship or something along those sort of lines. So that is starting to get that careersy sort of, giving you a bit of an angle for making sure you're successful in job interviews and things like that once you leave this degree. We also do policing and society, which gives you a really good unpacking of community policing and how it affects us all within society. So we make those 2 core compulsory modules. But then you might want to study victims of crime with Una. You might want to do young people crime and justice, which I think is taught by Julian Connor. And then you might want to do exploring crime in the media with Ruth McAllister. So you have different things there depending on what you really like. In semester 2, you've got research methods, which again is compulsory because that gives you all the skills you need to do your dissertation in final year. And then state crime is another big heavy duty compulsory module that you must do. But then you can study policing and the law. If you're interested maybe in doing a law conversion course after your degree, that might be an interesting one to do. Policy for children and families is done with social policy students, so starting to branch out a little bit if you're thinking about youth work or if you're thinking about being a social worker after your criminology degree. Restorative justice with Hugh Campbell. He is the most experienced restorative trainer in the world, basically has a huge wealth of experience, and the students love that course. Sentencing and punishment with Conor Murray as well as another really, really rewarding one. And then just before I run out of time, use the little arrows on the screen here. We have final year, where you see that you get much more choice. In first semester and final year, if you're a criminology and criminal justice student, you have a compulsory module, crime, social order and social control. And then you get to pick between 1, preparing for your crim dissertation, surveillance, terrorism, green criminology, gender, sexuality and crime. Some really good options there. If you are a minor student, you'll be doing 2 options from social policy or politics or something like that, and you'll get to pick one of these criminology things. There won't be any compulsory criminology modules for you. You just get to pick whichever one you want to do. Semester 2, you have to do prisons, punishment and power if you're CCJ, criminology and criminal justice. That's compulsory, and that's with Linda Moore. It's really good modules, very interesting. You have to do your dissertation, which is the big stress right at the very end, your finals, I suppose. And you get to pick one of these from psychology and crime, pardon me, migration, cybercrime, global crime, and drugs and crime. So the choices are endless, but you've got 3 years to think about that. They might be subject to chopping and changing and things like that, but we can see. So as I talked about, big emphasis on your self-learning, ability to adapt, engage, and interact with a variety of subject matters and teaching styles. And it's the end of being told, what to learn. Basically, you guys get a lot of freedom. We give you these very sort of quite general assignment questions, quite general essay questions, leaving you a huge sort of room to explore things in any way that you want. You go out, you hit the books, you get journal articles from online, you go to Google Scholar and you download things. You think of a topic which really fascinates you, a really good example which highlights the theory that you've been learning in your module, and you're free to explore any way you want, just as long as you provide lots of evidence to back up those arguments, so you'll be referencing. And that's something that we teach you a lot as well, how to reference, how to show what you've been reading, and how to highlight, how that has influenced your arguments when you're answering an essay. And also, can you be critical about these sources that you're reading? If you read an article in the Daily Mail or the Sun or even the Guardian, I suppose, or something like that, and you want to talk about it in your essay, well, I'll be quite interested in whether you're going to be critical of the approach that the editor or the journalist who wrote it has actually taken. So some interesting stuff in politics at the minute for our budding politicians here as well. That sort of thing I would imagine will be seeping into some of the my social control and social order essays, when we talk about the response to COVID-19 and how some people have been very good in terms of following that response. But some people maybe have been sort of a little bit more open to controversy about that. So that'll be things that I'll be reading about in my essays for my final years when I get into semester one. So people will have the freedom to explore whatever interests them or whatever inspires them from that point of view. Okay, so careers. So let me see. I've still only got one question here up here because my assistant has been working his way through, I think, answering some of these questions, which is great. Let me see if I just open it. So no open questions at the minute. Happy days. So the only one I needed the answer then was this one around careers for the time being. So criminology isn't a discipline like law or like psychology, where there is an accredited pathway to become a psychologist or a lawyer or a medical doctor, or something along those sort of lines. Criminology isn't, that sort of discipline. It is a fragmented discipline in that a criminology degree can be highly relevant to a huge range of different occupations and disciplines and creeds, I suppose, from that point of view. So we talked a little bit about how there was a first year module around forensics and police investigations. And so if you join the police or if you become a scene of crime officer, working for the PSNI as a private contractor or as working for that independent body, they might be really interested in the fact that you've done a criminology degree and done a lot of the background, knowledge and into this sort of topic and have practiced some of these different styles and things. That's just one tiny area where a criminology degree can be highly relevant. If you want to be a more general police officer, everybody starts off as a general police officer and then you move up the ranks, you specialize. Again, it's being highly encouraged that police officers now have a degree. A criminology degree is seen as one of the most relevant. So again, it stands you in really good stead if you want a career in the police. Also might give you some of the tools that you need to get through the assessment centre and things like that too. So, those sort of more sort of direct applications of criminology might, be, the easiest to draw links to. But there are lots of different things. A lot of them are quite indirect because I know where all my graduates are because I write their references for them every year. They ask me for a reference because they're going for this job. So a lot of them are working in PricewaterhouseCoopers as risk analysts, for example. They're working for Hughes Insurance Company, again, in risk and trying to spot people who are trying to cheat the system in terms of, fraudulent insurance claims and things like that. And they're having a fantastic career. They're going up through the ranks and doing very well. Thanks very much. A lot of my students are earning more than me now, which thinks I maybe took the wrong route in life. So risk management is a big sort of thing which comes across really clearly in terms of criminology, and that can work in a variety of different settings. Similarly with social housing and things like that, there's a huge amount of risk. There's a huge lot of sort of ideas where criminology, criminal behavior, also social problems and things like that, make your criminology degree highly relevant. And we have lots of people working in that industry, people working as policy officers across a broad range, not necessarily criminal justice. Again, lots of different industries. Prison officers is a much more specific one where your incredible teaching about prisons the whole way through your degree is highly relevant. Community safety coordinators, we talk a lot about antisocial behavior. We talk a lot about youth issues, dealing with drug addiction, dealing with alcohol dependency, all these sort of different areas. Make community safety coordinators, people who are, working, for Belfast City Council or all these other different councils as different types of enforcement officers and things like that. Really good career, really good pension, all the rest. Your criminology degree is a really good, starting point for that. Probation officers as well, you have to be a social worker in Northern Ireland to be a probation officer. So a lot of people finish their criminology degree and then do a top up to become a social worker and can be then working in a variety of different social work sort of type scenarios and situations. But a lot of them go into the probation service, which is quite an interesting one as well. But also post-grad study is a big thing as well. We have a lot of our students who go on to do a master's degree across a variety of different institutions. Some of them go to England, some of them go down to Trinity in Dublin, some go to Queen's, some do some of the master's degrees here at Ulster University, and we're also pioneering a bit of a master's degree in criminology, which we're hoping to launch next year at the minute as well. So watch the space for these sort of things. So a criminology career is something which is very varied and very complex. You can take a variety of different routes, but it's seen as one of those big crossover degrees, basically, which is very relevant to a range of different types of discipline, and is also relevant to those people who want to take their studies further, and perhaps study something more specific in terms of a discipline such as social work. So that's sort of the best way that I can sort of answer that question. What I would say is that we tend to have a very high proportion of our students in employment in the professional realm. It's something which certainly lends itself to doing very well once you get into these sort of situations. Has anybody else got any questions for me? No open questions at the minute. Let me see, 11:37. Let me
That's
just.
grand, Brian. I'll just go through. I've been keeping an eye on them, so just if we're at the end, then I'll be able to ask them to you, and then you'll be able to answer them.
Oh, dead on. That's grand.
All right, buddy.
Well, no worries, big man. Here we go then. Next one up. So that's my little sort of mini talk over. And just before I answer your questions, here's my little email address here. If anybody has any sort of follow-up questions they want to ask or anything else at all, do drop me a line as well. And I'll work really hard to get you responses to that as well. Okay, Michael, do you want to?
Okay, mate. Yep. So just first one come in from a careers advisor. Find criminology is extremely popular subject among pupils. What do you think are important skills, academic abilities that are relevant to the criminology degree?
Yeah, so bringing those sort of skills in, I think having a really analytical edge is really good. If you want to do well at a criminology degree, it's how well that you can read, around sort of quite diverse subject areas and have a really good sort of analytical edge to your reading. So can you read something and be quite critical? Mm-hmm. And so that when you're writing about it, it's really sort of critical analysis which you're setting out. And that sounds quite hard at the minute. When you're starting first year, what we're really focusing on is that, you can just give evidence to back up, that what you're talking about. But as you progress through your degree, we want you to really start hammering, some of these people out in society, for, some of the problems, some of the social problems, some of the situations that we have in our society. Can you be really critical about the way that people are running our society? And can you provide, sort of some alternative ideas, alternative perspectives for how things might happen? So I think to do well in this degree, it's really good to read a newspaper every day. Try to read a good quality newspaper, what we would have called a broadsheet newspaper. Again, can you be critical about those sort of articles that you're reading, and then can you apply them to some of the broader reading that you're doing about academia? If you pick up a journal, for example, the British Journal of Criminology, which you can check out, and they always give a few free articles and things like that online. When you read the articles, you'll see that the academics who are writing that always write very critically. They never leave any stone left unturned, basically. So be really thorough and be really analytical in terms of your reading, and just read. And that would be my big sort of advice, I think, for doing well. In terms of actually bringing specific skills then, to the fore for this, we really pick you up from the start and give you that complete crash course in criminology. Some people arrive with maybe a sociology A level. Some people now have a specific criminology A level as well, which is fantastic. And I think it maybe allows you to hit the ground running a little bit, particularly in terms of the theory and stuff like that, but it's really not necessary. As long as you've just got good skills for reading and good skills for writing and being analytical, you will really thrive once you arrive here and do this degree.
Brilliant. So just on grades, Brian, just instead of getting, say it was somebody was after 3 Bs and you got an A, B, C, would a different mixture of grades still get you onto the course?
So yes, so there's no issue with the different mixture of grades. It tends to be cumulative. Just it's based on the UCAS points for each grade. So we don't really mind, what way you get to that UCAS limit. It's just that it's one of the worst things about wanting to study criminology in Northern Ireland and wanting to stay home, is that there is a lot of competition. For places in this jurisdiction. We get a lot of applicants for criminology, and that's why the UCAS points system can be quite tough to overcome, and we tend to get students who are, have done pretty good and all the rest, but every year there are always pragmatic sort of conversations going on, and things that can be done. If the criminology and criminal justice degree is the hardest one to get onto, but some of the sort of associated degrees, such as sociology with criminology, social policy with criminology, and politics with criminology, they tend to have lower entry requirements. it might be a little bit less. It might need C's rather than B's and things like that,
Yeah.
and that gets set every year. And what I would say is that if you were to start that degree and you really like the criminology side of things, well, at the end of your first year, as long as you've done well and your marks are decent enough, then you can move on to the criminology and criminal justice degree. So that can be a nice little backdoor.
Brilliant, yeah.
Before I cut you off, Michael, is the other thing is perhaps if you don't get the grades, consider studying part-time as well, because it again is something that I have a bit more leeway in getting you onto the course.
Absolutely.
And after you do a couple of years part-time, you can go full-time as well.
Yep. And just on that, as Brian said, for part-time, so you don't need to apply through UCAS, you'll just apply directly through ulster.ac.uk through our website, go through, fill the form in online, and could well end up in Brian's desk. In terms of then assessing that for you to get onto the course, you might need to come in and stuff, but that'll be separate to UCAS, so just to make you aware of that. Brian, are there opportunities for a year abroad with the course?
So there is a number of little internships. We will allow any sort of the Ulster University broader opportunities. We are perfectly happy for any of our students to go for that. We don't actually offer a year abroad ourselves as part of our criminology degree, but through Ulster University there are some initiatives, and we're happy to give you a leave of absence for a year if you want to take up one of those opportunities, and then you just return and join the next year. We also have a PSNI internship where you can go and work with the PSNI for a year as well, which has proven really popular with students.
Okay.
So it means that the people that you started with in first year, you won't graduate with them at the end.
Yep.
But that the opportunity to be able to travel, or the opportunity to be able to work with the police for a year, counters that for people.
Okay. And somebody just commented they're equally obsessed with Sopranos, Brian. So
yeah.
there's probably somebody who's going to get onto the course.
Best show ever, right? That's the, you need to send me an email, let me know so I can get you on.
So, and then somebody posted about the careers, which you covered there, a broad range of career opportunities available for people.
That's it. There's a little live question there about forensic psychology. Is it possible to move into forensic psychology after a degree in criminology? I'm a psychology undergrad myself, a graduate, and just from that, I know that for psychology, to become an accredited psychologist, you need to have a psychology degree. Unfortunately, so you can do your criminology degree, but I think you would then have to go and study some form of psychology degree. I think in England there are some conversion courses, but we don't have that in Northern Ireland yet. So I think you can study forensic psychology at master's level, okay, but if you want to become an accredited forensic psychologist, I think you still need a degree with BPA accreditation, which you can do.
Somebody's asked, is there much practical learning in the course?
So yes, there is a lot. So I talked a lot about forensics and things like that, and that has a lot of practical learning where you go out into the field and apply some of these skills and everything else. But also then just in terms of your own research as well, you have the practicalities of applying your your research skills in the community post COVID-19, of course, which is it's been sort of limiting the options for some of our students, unfortunately, at the minute. But yes, you can go and do research in the field, do interviews and do all these sorts of things. We have field trips to things like Crumlin Road Prison and stuff like that. So there's lots of different field trips and little bits and pieces built in the whole way through the course where you go out into the community and get to put some of this stuff into action.
Okay, man. The forensics part of things, do we get to do casts and things ourselves, or do we just learn about it?
So you get to do casts and things like that yourselves.
Great.
You get to do scene of crime investigations, where there's been a bit of a murder set up or whatever else, and you have to go in and check out. We have a mannequin with a bit of blood and stuff like that, and it gets a little bit gory. And unfortunately, it's very gender, quite, it's always a poor woman that gets killed. That's all I would say. We're going to have to get a male one. But so you get to do all these sort of practical skills. And I know for next year, actually, there's been a bit of talk at the course team about how we can enhance that more, because we're getting a lot of feedback from students that they really like this sort of applied stuff.
Yep. Somebody's asked, if they're studying part-time, can they take part in placements?
Yes. So if you're a part-timer, you can do everything that the full-timers do. It just means that you take longer to do it. So if you're part-time, you only do 3 modules a year. And so it takes you 2 years to complete your first year. But then if a placement opportunity comes up, you still get your leave of absence. You still get to go away and
take part in those things.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leanne. Yep. Hopefully that's answered Leanne's question. And if COVID-19 affects our ability to physically attend lectures, and we have them all online. How are we able to do research without the facility of the library?
So yes, so the library is both a virtual facility
Yeah,
and a
they have
physical
loads
facility, and
online there.
yeah,
Yeah.
and increasingly it's becoming more and more online. So
Uh-huh.
you have access to all the e-journals and all the electronic
All the
resources.
research. Yeah.
We're also buying lots of books now in e-form at the minute, so that you can read those as well. But it will take a little bit of pragmatism,
Yeah.
for next semester, and while
Yeah.
we try to adjust to these new sort of times, and hopefully it'll only be next semester, hopefully, where there is
Absolutely.
an
Yeah.
online element to the learning. But Google Scholar's getting a lot better now as well and stuff like that. So,
Uh-huh.
a lot of leeway will be given for you guys doing
Lots
your own
on there.
research, and also there's a bit of support around materials and equipment and all that sort of stuff. So there's huge conversations all going on about that at the minute, and
Surely.
we're doing everything we can.
Yeah, and as you're saying there, physically attending lectures, we're just not sure, how long that's going to be,
Yeah.
and what the format is going to take come September, October, when students are coming on the campus, and how that's going to be, or
Yeah.
else it'll, as Brian says, maybe it's just one semester and then they're back. So it'll
Mhm.
not be a massive length of time. It'll not be a full year or anything, a full academic year that wouldn't be in place. So hopefully,
That's fingers crossed. We're just
yeah,
basically dependent on the public health advice and what we're getting. I think
absolutely,
universities, because we can do a lot of it online, it might be one of the last things to come back. Whereas
yeah.
schools and things like that are under pressure to come back sooner because they can't do it as well online.
Yeah. Somebody's just asked there, so criminology is with us. That's at Jordanstown campus.
So that's at the Georgetown
Yeah,
campus. Yes, you can also study criminology at Queen's University Belfast as well, in Belfast. But at the minute, it's in the Georgetown campus. Those of you from Belfast will see the big, massive new campus being constructed at the minute.
yeah,
Close to the river down there. Near York Street, and so there is no fixed date for when we'll be moving into that campus yet. But there would be the understanding that you'll be moving into this new shiny Belfast city centre campus at some stage during your degree. We'll just have to wait and see
yeah,
when that will be.
absolutely. The time scale was for a year 13 student now would be the first batch of students to go into that new campus.
Okay.
But I know maybe construction was held back there just with a number of people on site, so that might put a delay in that. But keep an eye out, obviously, as the year goes on, and the year 14, that information will be updated on our website and sent out to schools and stuff for that.